Well, guys, it's no secret that 2020 sucked. It was just a horrible year, an absolute dumpster fire, and what better way to commemorate that than basically talking about the dumpster fire movies of this year. So here is my top 10 worst films of 2020. So I'll say right now, I'm only doing a top 10 this year. I'm not doing a top 20 or top 15, solely because of the fact that there were just so many films that were delayed. This applies to my best list as well. There were so many films that were delayed. There were so many films that we weren't able to get that I think it just makes sense to do a top 10 this year. There weren't as many movies anyway as I normally watch and go out of my way to see. So, definitely I think that top 10 is good enough. I think that I'm going to be able to talk about all of these films at length. And what a year, honestly. What a year. Because, look, last year was an amazing year for movies, and this year definitely, though, it was not quite as good, and it definitely did not have its shortage of just horrible schlockiness, especially because, there were just so many films that we normally wouldn't even see because of the fact that there were so few films that came out. But anyway, we're just getting to right now. Now, obviously, just like any other year, aside from these 10 films, there were a lot of films that I watched. I will say right now, I did not get to watch every single bad film potentially bad film of 2020. So, sorry, 365 Days, that will not be on this list. Did not watch that film. But I do have quite a few dishonorable mentions because there are only 10 films here, so there are a few dishonorable mentions. Starting off with The Princess Switched Again, Artemis Fowl, Antebellum, The Kissing Booth 2, Doolittle, A Nice Girl Like You, Holidates, The Main Event, Brahms the Boy 2, Zombies 2, Superintelligence, The Turning, Songbird, and Bloodshot. I'm sure many of these you guys are surprised are not on here, considering how much I hated them. There were just 10 films that were a little bit worse than this, and we're just going to dive into right now, starting off with number 10. There were a lot of consistencies within 2020, but just bottom-of-the-barrel comedies like this one take up a majority of this list, really, especially for the first half. And Coffee and Kareem is just the perfect example of that. This is such a just consistently obnoxious and just really annoying film. You have two performances here, none of which have chemistry. You have Ed Helms just being really annoying and not really someone that I enjoyed watching. But then Terrence Little Garden High was just such a little shit throughout this entire movie. His whole goal is to just break up this relationship as much as he can. He's trying to make Ed Helms look as bad as he can, and then the film tries to eventually get you to buy into the relationship, and you just never really do. You have Betty Gilpin in probably her worst role yet, where she ends up going, the fact this film made Betty Gilpin bad, that's when you know this movie is not working. Taraji P. Henson is just utterly wasted here. There are just so many things I couldn't stand about this film. It's such an obnoxious and just really unfunny comedy, which was one of many this year. We had a lot of these, but Coffee and Kareem was definitely one of the worst for me. I really could not stand this film very much at all. It's an 83-minute film, but it felt really just like 2 hours just because of just how little I cared about anything that was going on. It's consistently obnoxious. It's the kind of comedy that Netflix pretty much tries to make constantly. And especially the fact that the whole conflict, the main plot of this film is literally just this kid wanting to not only just make bad things happen to Ed Helms, but straight up kill Ed Helms just because of the fact that he was having sex with his mom, and now they have to work together. That alone just tells you how stupid of a film this is. I really just forgot how dumb of a movie this is. I really just forgot how much I hated this one, but I didn't forget enough to leave it off this list. It was easily one of the most excruciating comedies that I watched all year, and definitely deserves to be at number 10. There were a lot of horrible Netflix comedies, but this is easily, I think, one of their worst yet. know Tyler Perry, you never fail to make an appearance on this list in some way, and A Fall from Grace might just easily be one of his worst films yet. I mean, the entire premise of this film alone is just so copy and paste of what we normally get from him, where you have this couple and they're really struggling, and this woman is now getting accused of murdering her husband, and we go through an entire story of why it could potentially be her, but then you realize there's like a larger conspiracy that's going on here, and just there's so many things that don't really work here at all. The fact this film was 2 hours long especially, it was so overlong, and not only that, it takes that 2 hour length to be the most surface level lifetimey bullshit that Tyler Perry usually churns out. You have performances here that are definitely trying, but definitely don't really work. Crystal R. Fox was just so over the top, and I couldn't stand her throughout this entire movie. The relation between her and Mehcad Brooks especially just really doesn't work in this film. You don't feel the chemistry between them. You don't feel any of what's really going on there, and it just never really worked in this film. But also, it just focuses on a murder case that just really isn't all that interesting. You never really feel like you're diving into the things that you really want to, and at any point the Tyler Perry has to do something interesting, he just kind of refrains from it. And I've talked about this every single year, but he really is just making the same movie every single time, and I don't understand why people just keep letting him get away with it. It's so annoying. Like, there's so many things that don't work about this movie. And then you get to the ending, which is just one of the most, I think, just out of nowhere and ridiculous twists he has done yet. That practically ruins the entire movie. This movie already sucked, but the ending came in and just made it feel incredibly tedious and so incredibly mishandled. But I mean, when your film is made in 5 days and has so little effort put into it, what are you really expecting? Tyler Perry is just giving less and less of a shit as these films do go on, and A Fall from Grace is probably one of the biggest offenses of that yet. It's about as phony as the hairpiece on Tyler Perry's head throughout this entire film. There's so much I hated about this one. You guys know how much I hate Tyler Perry, and again, I want to like one of his movies, but he really just keeps getting worse, and A Fall from Grace is easily one of his worst to date. It was a horrible way to start out the year, and unfortunately, I think is not gonna be the end for him. You know, he keeps talking about how, like, oh, I'm done with this, and I'm not gonna do this anymore, but he keeps going back to it, and if nobody's gonna tell him to stop, then he's just gonna continue. So, yeah, Tyler Perry, just please, for my sanity, just stop. I know you're not going to, but, like, I know you're capable of crafting something good. I think you are, but, like, just get some inspiration. Do literally anything different, and you will stop making appearances on this list. But you know what? If you want to keep pissing me off, by all means, go for it, because you usually find your way onto this list, and this year is no different. Oh my god, Desperados, yet another really unfunny Netflix comedy with probably one of their dumbest premises yet. I mean, the entire film is literally just this woman going to Mexico to delete this, like, email about her new boyfriend that she said, you know, that's really, like, unfavorable to him, something that she doesn't think that he's going to enjoy, but, like, you know exactly how this is gonna go. She's gonna end up, you know, she finds this other guy that she, like, was in, like, that, you know, was an old flame of hers, and, like, they're gonna start to connect and things like that, and you just know what's going to happen here. But not to mention, all three of these characters are just so fucking annoying and unlikable. Nasim Pedrad gives easily one of the worst performances, I think, of the entire year. I could not stand her throughout this entire movie. But then you focus on the other subplots in this film. One of the subplots concerning this kid who constantly is trying to make her look like she's this pedophile, like, hitting on him constantly. It's just really weird stuff like that, and that's not even the worst part of this movie. The plot in general is just so stupid. It goes in the most, I think, obvious and predictable directions possible, and also, just in general, there are just so many things I couldn't stand about this movie. The tone is switching constantly. Sometimes it's trying to be, like, sweet and heartfelt, and then other times it's trying to be something far more gross out and raunchy, and just, these are the kind of comedies that I really can't stand. I really hated Desperados a lot. It's definitely one of the worst Netflix comedies to date, and again, what are you really expecting? I don't know what it is with Netflix, but they just tend to put out the worst possible comedies. It's very rare that they have a good one, and Desperados is yet another example. And also, just the cherry on top of it, the fact that I have to be associated with the cat in this movie and have the misfortune of having the same name as him, that alone just sums up how much how much this film really just annoyed me and how much I couldn't stand it. So definitely deserves to be at number 8. Oh, hey, it's one of the few actual theatrical releases on this list, Fantasy Island. Remember when that came out, when the world was, like, normal and we didn't know we'd be in the situation we were? Yeah, I didn't forget about it, because this film is just one of the biggest clusterfucks that I've seen in a very long time. Look, I already hated Jeff Wadlow's previous film, Truth or Dare, and I still do think that film is slightly worse, but Fantasy Island just represents everything this guy is terrible at. He's telling this story that already is very uninteresting. These nightmare type scenarios that all of these characters are in are just so impractical. They don't make a lot of sense. A lot of them just aren't really given a lot of depth, but you also have tones that are constantly clashing throughout this movie. Austin Stowell wanting to be in this war film of sorts, but then you have Jimmy O Yang and Ryan Hansen's character who want to be in some party. They want to party with people, and it shows how little they care. But then you have Lucy Hale on this hostage sort of situation where she's trying to bully, someone that was like a childhood bully towards her. She's trying to torture her throughout this movie. There's so many things that are going on throughout this film that you're already just not really caring about, because there's so much that it throws at you at once, and it's already not working. And then on top of that, you have Michael Pena giving one of the worst performances that I have seen in a very long time. So unconvincing as this character of as this character of Mr. Rourke. It's so unconvincing, it's so cartoony, it's so fucking phony, and just, I don't understand any of what's going on in this movie. There are just so many things that don't really work here. And then to top it all off, you have that twist. And that twist just brings what's already a horrible film down to another level of terrible. None of it makes any sense. None of it connects in the way that it's supposed to. And I will never forget when leaving this film, which normally when I hate a movie and I'm in a theater, the audience is not hating it as much as I do. I literally saw, leaving this film and walking out, there literally was a woman who was behind me and said, "What the fuck was that?" And you know what? I am right there with you, because I have no idea what this was. I don't know what Jeff Wadlow was trying to do. The whole film, I think, could have maybe been something special, but it was completely unrealized in that way. And just in general, it's one of the dumbest horror films that I think I've seen in a very long time. I really don't know what Jeff Wadlow's doing at this point, but the more he goes on, the more I just really are starting to hate him as a director, and this might be his most frustrating and just most perplexing film yet. I legitimately don't know what he was trying to get out of it. I don't know what anyone was really going for with this movie. It just was an absolute mess from start to finish, and it was a film that, again, came out pretty early this year, and I think some people have forgotten about it, but I certainly have not. This was such a miserable and just downright just perplexing experience of a film that I really never want to think about again. And definitely there's so many bad performances, so many things I hate about this movie, so many horrible effects as well. The look of this film was just consistently awful. There are just so many things I hate about Fantasy Island, and because of all that, it definitely deserves to be at number 7. Theron Missy. Theron Missy, yet another horrible Netflix comedy, and oh boy, this one is really a doozy, because look, going into this film, I already knew that it probably was going to be something really dumb, but then you factor in this whole premise, and it just, none of it really makes any sense. You have David Spade, and he thinks he's meeting this woman, but he isn't. He's falling for this woman that is just so over the top, is so larger than life in that way, to the point where she feels like a cartoon character, and as much as Lauren Lapkus tries, this character is just so annoying in that way, and I don't think they did a very good job with that at all. And the things that she's getting David Spade to do, I mean, they're just immoral. The things that she wants him to do, it's horrifying. I don't understand then why he decides to stay with this woman. There's clearly another woman there that he wants to be with. Why does he continue to go with her? Why doesn't he go with this other woman? And so they don't do a good job with that. But then David Spade in general is so unlikable in this movie. He's not someone you like following around. He's not someone that is fun to watch in this film really at all. He's just really boring, and he doesn't really do a good job with that at all. There's so many moments in this film that don't work for me. Nick Swardson is giving probably one of his worst performances to date. The boat scene, especially in this film, is one that I truly will never forget. I really just hate these kind of films. I don't understand why David Spade continues to do this stuff. You have people like Adam Sandler, who is doing Uncut Gems. You have someone like Kevin James, even, who's doing Becky this year, and yet David Spade continues to do this same bullshit, and I don't know what he's getting out of it. I don't know what he's really trying to do, but this is easily one of the worst offenses yet. It's so overly raunchy. It's extremely predictable where the film is going to end up going, but none of it is really convincing at all. The film is definitely trying to be funny, and it really does fail at it in basically every conceivable way, and it's a film that I was just so miserable throughout, so miserable in fact that I was gonna do a full review for it and never really did, because this film just really pissed me off to no end. But it's the type of comedy that we get every single year, and I just couldn't stand a single second of it, and that is why it is, of course, at number 6. Oh my god, The Last Days of American Crime. We're really getting into the shit stains right now. I mean, talk about a film that is just so tone deaf on basically every single level. Everything about this film is so stupid. Everything about this film is so mean-spirited, so incredibly overlawn, and you just don't understand why we're following these characters. And this isn't a bad premise for a film, as I've said before, but when you focus on such boring, nothing characters, I mean, it really just brings down this entire film. You have Edgar Ramirez doing his usual thing where he's just talking like this throughout the film, but it's Michael Pitt especially who really annoyed me with his "I'm Kevin Cash" delivery, and he's constantly talking like this throughout the film, and it's so unconvincing, and that's like his one mode throughout the entire movie, giving one of the worst performances of the entire year. But then you factor in that these are the characters that we're following here, and they're just so unlikable. I don't give a shit about the romance that Edgar Ramirez has with Anna Brewster. I don't care about the love triangle between him, Anna Brewster, and Michael Pitt. I don't care any of what's going on there. They couldn't even make Sharlto Copley good. Sharlto Copley is in this movie, and he's giving one of the worst American accents I think I've ever heard. It's so unconvincing. I don't know what happened when it came to this movie. Olivier Megaton is a director that I just cannot stand at all. It doesn't seem like he has any idea of what he wants this movie to be. He doesn't really seem to have any real impact with this film. I think this is a good premise, but good premise does not equal good film, and this film in general, I mean, just the way he directs action, it's so downright incomprehensible. It's very hard to tell what's going on. It feels so low budget in that way. It starts off horrible, and it just keeps going from there. We're focusing on such unlikable characters. We're focusing on such a nothing story, and to top it all off, it's 2.5 hours long, and I really have no idea why. So much of this film is just zipping through plots, and it really just brings this entire film down for me. It's one of the worst films that Netflix has ever made. The fact that it came out during the George Floyd protests as well, and the whole thing is concerning like law officials and things like that, really just a bad taste overall. There were a lot of horrible releases that Netflix put out this year, but this very well, I think, is probably their worst. Just constantly a film that just made me so miserable. It's a film that I held off on for a while, but I was able to finally watch it, and it is every bit as bad as everyone has said. Just a constant train wreck from start to finish. So many things I hate about The Last Days of American Crime, and that is why, of course, it is at number 5. It's a movie about fucking bobbleheads. Like, what are you really expecting here? I mean, going into this film, you know this isn't going to be high art. You know that. You know this film isn't really going to be anything that special, but when you actually look at the premise for Bobbleheads the movie, and you see how much of a, not just how stupid it is, but how much of a blatant ripoff it is of other movies, that's when you know just how bottom of the barrel this film really is. I mean, the premise alone of just these grown-ups leaving, and oh bobbleheads come to life. That's like Toy Story. But then you also have bobbleheads trying to find like their true purpose beyond just being a bobblehead, because that's interesting, right? They're bobbleheads. They have some sort of like bobblehead creed of some sort that we definitely care about, that we're really invested in. That's definitely something that we want to follow throughout this movie. But then the amount of bobble puns, like Bobble 5 and things like that, I really couldn't stand in this movie. The characters are so just disposable here. You have fucking Deuce, who is like the Jackie Robinson, but he doesn't want to be called Jackie Robinson for like copyright purposes, and he's so annoying here. This cat that everyone looks at is almost like this godlike figure. I couldn't stand him throughout the movie. Just all the bobbleheads are so annoying here. But then the animation of them just like bobbing their head constantly, just moving like this, it's not very pleasant to look at. It's not something that I think even kids are really going to enjoy. And bobbleheads in general, I mean, I don't really understand the relevance of this. I don't understand why they decided to really make this movie. But then to top it all off, you have two of the most annoying human characters possible in Luke Wilson and especially Jennifer Coolidge, who I couldn't stand throughout this entire movie, giving one of the worst performances of the entire year. Where that character ends up going is so utterly predictable. It was so obvious as to what they were really going to do here. This just in general, every single year we get that one kids movie that you just question, why does this exist? What is the point of this? Why do we need a film about bobbleheads? But this is easily one of the most confounding yet. I don't know who this film is for. I don't know what they're trying to do. The most recognizable name in this film is Cher, and she's only in the film for like 5 minutes, and she has almost nothing to really do here beyond an exposition dump and some stupid dance that they want you to do. They want you to learn how to dance like Cher and do the bobble and things like that, and I am not having it at all. There's so many things that bother me about this film. It's one of the worst things that I have seen all year, and it's basically what you were expecting. I think nobody was going into this expecting high art, but it's even worse than you really could have imagined. I really couldn't stand this one at all. I don't know who this is for. I don't think kids would even end up enjoying this film. A lot of people didn't see it, but I had the misfortune of watching it, and it definitely deserves to be on this list as a result. Look, the Lego Movie was a very special film, but we really need to try to stop making that happen again. It's a special film. It worked for a reason, and lightning is just simply not going to strike twice, and so I hope we can just cut the cord, stop making films like this, and move on. But, Hollywood's going to do its thing. The fact this film was probably going to come to theaters originally is pretty scary to me, but it's out for some reason. I don't know who it's for, and yeah, Bobbleheads the movie, just bottom of the barrel in every way, and not something that is worth anyone's time. Definitely deserves to be at number 4. And from the way I'm talking about it, you may think that I really do hate it a lot, and I very much do, but the next 3 films I hate just a little bit more. I honestly did not think it could get worse after. I really didn't. I did not think that this film could get any worse. The way that After was already focusing on such a toxic relationship with these two characters, one of which seems like she had no interest in him at first, but then suddenly was. I really thought that it just couldn't get worse than that. But then you have this film in which they're trying so hard to get you to root for these two, and yet all it does is make me dislike them more. All it does is make me feel less, it made me feel like this is more and more of a toxic relationship than it already was. I mean, Hardin, especially as a character, they try so hard to get you to care about, but he's just such an asshole to Tessa. He's constantly trying to make decisions for her. He's constantly showing up in her life when she doesn't want him to. Meanwhile, Tessa is just such a confusing character that doesn't seem to know what the fuck she wants throughout this entire movie. Sometimes she wants nothing to do with him. Other times she seems to want him. Other times she just wants him in a sexual context. It's so hard to tell what is going on with either of these two characters. But then to top it all off, it's easily one of the most directionless sequels that I have seen in such a long time. There's so many major events that happen in this film that are just never discussed again. What is that one moment with Tessa where she ends up in this life-threatening accident and then they never bring it up again? I don't know what was going on there. There's a plot revelation at the end of this movie that they want you to be really shocked at, and I just was not at all, because again, it didn't seem like a big deal. There is time to delve into Hardin's character, and yet all of it is skipped over because all this film seems to know how to do is just show these two smashing. That's all they care about, because that's what the audience want to see, right? They just want to see these characters smash constantly. They don't want good character. They don't want good story. No, nobody really cares about that. Nobody really wants that at all. And then you have Dylan Sprouse, who, despite the fact he's definitely the smartest character in the movie, could not give less of a shit in this film. He sounds so utterly bored, and there's so many points where he's not even in the movie that you must think that, like, he just didn't really want to be there, because it really does feel like that throughout this entire film. It's so dispassionate, it's so joyless in that way, and just in general, it's one of the worst franchises that we have had in a very long time. I've hated the 50 Shades franchise a lot, but I'm starting to think that the after ones might just be a little bit worse. The fact that there's still not 2, but 3 films more, there's 3 more films to go in the series. I don't know what the fuck they're gonna do. I don't know what else they're really going to follow this up with, but whatever it is, I am not excited at all. I feel like the plot revelation we get in this movie that's like a big moment, it's probably going to end up leading to absolutely nothing, because most of this film end up amounting to nothing anyway. It's one of the worst sequels that I've seen in a very long time, and it's just the definition of a film that has really no reason to exist whatsoever. I don't know what the point of these movies are. I don't know why Wattpad movies are a thing. I really have not been able to wrap my head around that. I still can't wrap my head around it, but After We Collided especially makes me so annoyed and really detest the fact that they are a thing. From the way I'm discussing it, again, you probably think that this is one of the worst of the year for me. This was very high on my list for a reason. A lot of people didn't see it, and good for you if you didn't, but I very much did, and I wish I had not. Just one of the worst things I've seen in a very long time. Definitely deserves to be at number 3. Just please stop with these fucking movies. Holy shit, Infamous. I mean, talk about a film that could not be more tone deaf. Talk about a film that couldn't have worse timing than this one. I mean, everything about Infamous is a film that baffled me to really no other level. I mean, right off the bat, you have 2 characters here that are just so unlikable. They're both basically just edgelords in that way. Bella Thorne is giving her worst performance to date as this character of Ariel, who she loves to be named that because she loves The Little Mermaid, and they have to reference that for some reason. But then to top it all off, the whole film really just feels like Bella Thorne watched Queen and Slim, was inspired by Queen and Slim, and is like, you know what, I can do that. But instead, it is 2 white people who are robbing their way across the Southland for really no reason at all. There's really no reasoning for why they're doing this other than they really want to. And then for some reason, they're gaining like this fame over it. Everyone looks up to them. Everyone wants to be them. People want to take pictures with them. It's just absolutely disgusting, and I don't understand any of what this film was really trying to do. I don't understand why Bella Thorne has like this weird affinity for guns throughout the movie. It seems like she has this obsession with it. She just loves the idea of a gun. Something about it just like really arouses her, and I don't really understand that. I don't understand why they want me to believe that these 2 would be in a relationship when Jake Manley just seems like he has no business being there. He doesn't want anything to do with her character. He doesn't want anything to do with this movie. I don't understand what the point of that was. I don't understand why Amber Riley is in this film for like 5 minutes just for them to basically just like leave her behind, because that's not racist at all. That doesn't look bad. Just everything about Infamous is a film that I just constantly question, how is this approved? How is this a film that people got a hold of and thought, you know what, people are going to enjoy this. People are going to really relate to these characters. People are really going to sink their teeth into this film. Because no, we're not. I mean, everything about this film is so immoral. Everything about this film is so disgusting. The fact that it's a thing. There are so many points in this movie as well, editing-wise, that feel just like a music video. There's so many things I hate about Infamous as a film. It's 2 edgelords that want to be criminals, and that's really all this amounts to. There's nothing to care about. There's nothing to latch onto. It just really feels like a film that is so tone deaf. It feels like a film that doesn't seem to understand its audience. It seems like a film that doesn't seem to realize just how offensive that it truly is. And it's a film that just really appalled me to no end, and while watching it, I just had no idea how any of this got approved in the way that it did. And again, you really would think that this would be my number one. It was for a long time. It really was, because I really despise this film a lot. But then, before the year ended, there's one more film I watched that's just a little bit worse than this. I think you guys might have an idea of what it is because of how much I really went off on this film in my rant. But of course, we have to get into it. It, of course, is... There is really no film this year that I think appalls me more than the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. I mean, following up a film like The Haunting of Sharon Tate, I really didn't think it could get any worse than that. But then you have Daniel Farron's back at it again. Not only is he trying to do revisionist history, but he's generally trying to get you to believe that this scenario happened, that Nicole Brown Simpson could have potentially been murdered by this random serial killer that she had like a couple encounters with, that this could have been the guy that actually did it, and yet... there's no sufficient evidence that that can actually happen. But that's the least of this film's problem. It's the fact that he's doing that, but then also trying to, again, really exploit this very saddening story. I mean, again, this was a actual murder that happened, and I don't know what he's really trying to do here. You have actors that are good, but in this film are subjected to the worst possible dialogue and the worst possible line delivery. I mean, Mina Savari, I don't know what's happened to her. She had such a promising future, but here she's just delegated to such a one-note character that has zero development in the entire movie. There's nothing to her. There's nothing that she goes through. We don't get to care about Nicole Brown. We don't get to understand who she is. We don't get into her head. Nothing. There's truly nothing to her in this movie. But then Nick Stahl playing this really confusing serial killer who might also have like a split personality of sorts, and he has zero chemistry with anything going on in this movie. Taryn Manning wearing the worst possible wig that I've ever seen in maybe one of the worst possible wigs that I've ever seen in a film. It's so unconvincing. You have dialogue that is just so on the nose and tone deaf. I mean, that one line about Bruce Jenner and him being and it being a drag that he's not there, like, come on, movie, you know what you're doing. Every single decision that is made in this film, I don't know what Farron's is doing. The murder itself is played out in such a grotesque and downright disgusting manner. Everything about it doesn't make sense. There are references to other films that Farron's has done documentaries of, and I don't understand what he's trying to do there. OJ as a character barely has any significance in this film. It kind of makes me feel like Farron's might have some racial stuff there, and I don't really like anything about that at all. Just everything about this film absolutely disgusts me. I already hated Haunting of Sharon Tate a lot. I already hated everything that that film was really trying to do, but here I really do think he is on another level of terrible. The fact that he wants you to believe the scenario actually did happen, and then spends 10 minutes with all of this documentary footage that actually disproves his theory entirely, that just shows how misguided this film really is. That just shows how stupid this film really is, and I really wish that he would stop. I understand he keeps doing this because he clearly just likes pissing people off. He likes people getting upset at his movies. But truly, this is one of the worst possible trends I've ever seen. I don't know what he's really doing. This guy clearly could have talent. This guy clearly could be making something good, but yet he is subjecting himself to the most offensive shit possible, and I don't really know what he's getting out of any of this, and it just... I really just don't understand why it continues to go this way. It's a film that at the time we thought was going to be the worst thing that 2020 offered us, and you know, that was fun while it lasted, but it really was just on brand for how much of a dumpster fire 2020 turned out to be that this film was actually released. I really hope this is where the train stops. I hope that he has no more murder films in his arsenal. If he does, I hope that it just continues to be like, I hope that it ends up being like a fictional film and not a film that's trying to really just exploit and build off of a very personal and sad tragedy that affected a lot of people. It's already a really dumb idea to begin with, but the fact that he continues to do it, I just really don't know what he is getting out of this at all. It's easily the worst film that I have seen this year. There really is nothing that compares to it. It's so incompetently made too. There's so many editing things that don't make sense. There's so many things that just this figure that like she keeps seeing that doesn't make sense. The tone is constantly clashing. It takes forever for anything to happen. It's such a bore of a film to sit through. There's just so many things I hate about this film, and I really just think there is nothing, as much as I hated all the other films I talk about, there truly is nothing that compares to how much I hate something like Murder Nicole Brown Simpson, and really hope it's a trend that just dies immediately. Everything about this film I can't stand at all, and definitely deserves to be number one. Well, that was fun, diving back into the films that, I really hated for this year. Look, I know that there weren't as many that I talked about. I know I didn't dive as deep into some of them as much as I wanted to, but I do this every single year. I figured I might as well do one this year. I hope you guys did enjoy this video, though. I do have a best list coming out soon, which I'm definitely very excited to delve into that. I have way more things to talk about there for sure. But other than that, guys, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Comment down below, let me know what your worst movies of the year was. I do have quite a few more videos to put out before I do that best list, as I said, but I'm definitely excited to do that for sure. That's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.